We're all in on the idea of vertical AI and using Gen AI for automating workflows in maybe under-digitized industries.
Yeah.
What are you hearing from your clients today?
Something really important for the startup community to pay attention to is, because some of these, I'll say, development types of platforms are coming to bear.
Yeah.
Like how.
And when you say development, do you mean like the big labs like an OpenAI or an Anthropic? Or,
yeah, something like that, right? So I think what we're going to see is potentially a lot of challenge against, I'll say, very pointed solutions.
Okay.
Right? Unless, right, that pointed solution becomes part of a bigger
Yes.
model. So I think it's just something for the startup world to really understand. I definitely see, a horizon over the next 3 to 8 years. Like, it's not going, those solutions are going to be needed, but if you look 5 to 10 years over the horizon, I think that's where we start to see a real challenge to some of these point solutions versus more of like a stack that allows for development capability.
That makes a lot of sense. And do you think that's different than if we were talking 5 or 6 years ago when we were talking about SaaS solutions, like the point solution? So
I do.
Okay, interesting. So it's more pronounced.
And I think it's more pronounced because I think what we're seeing with folks having the ability to play in some of these larger LLMs for our own personal lives is, I can now use that in my corporate world. And I no longer need to go to my IT organization with a list of requirements. I can now, as a business user, really rapidly play with a potential solution in that solution capability and deploy it immediately, right? So I think that's where I'm seeing the bar of entry and the speed of adoption, right? We talk about historically the biggest barrier to SaaS solutions was training and adoption.
Right.
Well, now I don't have training and adoption because now I can actually tell the solution, I don't like that color, change the color. I want this module to be on this part of my page versus that one. And I don't have to go through months of waiting for a technology team to redesign that and deploy it.
Right.
I can do it as the user. So that's a huge advantage. And I do think in parallel, though, one of the other outside pieces for folks to focus on, I think the unmet need is going to be around the governance.
Interesting. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think, as we've got this huge now ability for the business world to go create these solutions, how do I know that you're creating something, I'm creating something, and what we're building is not going to run against one another? So as we start to think about, okay, well, what's the governance process around this that really, it allows for the speed to delivery, but in a way that really is not going to drive the gears, right, to being stuck to one another, because there's not an awareness that you created a model, I created a model. We're both speaking to a transactional application potentially around a shipment, and you give it one answer and I give it to the other because we're both thinking right, but just thinking differently. And now the transactional application goes, what the hell?
Right. And then like, what's the source? What's the source of truth? So for you, you're kind of thinking you're bullish on the impact of large language models and generative AI in the long run. It feels like not the incumbents, but the larger providers have like the better approach to the market today, given that like every supply chain is different and it's going to be easier to work with like one big player. Is that kind of how you view it?
I don't know if it's an existing big player, but I do think, if we think about like to the data science community, like the Azure stack has become kind of a golden standard for where I do my data science type of work. I think we're probably going to see a very similar type of emergence.
Dynamic. Yeah. So then, because I think a lot of the founders that are going to be watching are probably building application layer solutions.
Yeah.
So your comment about like point solutions are going to be tougher unless you're attached to like a true business outcome?
I think so, right? And I think that's always been true of these technologies.
Yeah.
Like you have to be able to ring the cash register.
That's right.
So how is your product tied to the business cash flow?
Yeah.
Anyway, right? Like if I can't tell that, why am I building it?
Right.
Like we're not in business for nonprofit reasons. And that's not to say that none of these tools should be used, but I'm just saying in general, when you're applying to a corporation, it is for them too around what's the return on investment, what's the speed of value that I'm going to get for that. And so if I can't tie that to some sort of true P&L space, I think the founder needs to be scratching their head and saying, okay, what do I need to do that's really going to be able to tie to a key KPI for that organization that matters to them, and I'm able to prove that value for them.
Prove that value. And if I'm starting with something that's a little bit of a point solution, how do I broaden that over time, right?
Yeah.
Even if that's a starting point.
Yes.